evening and welcome to the Janesville Performing Arts Center. My name is Susie Baldwin. I'm the Director of Education and Outreach. It is wonderful to see all of you here this evening for Tales of Adventure. I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Kimball Properties, as well as the Osborne family. I would also like to take a moment to thank our wonderful donors who have donated our raffle items. Velocity Multisport and Cycling, please head down to the lobby and see the wonderful Explorer bike that they have donated. Surely you will be inspired by the stories this evening to enter the raffle, and one of you will win. And also thank you to our door prize sponsor, Michael Cycles, and one of you will be winning a $100 gift card. And without further ado, we give you Tales of Adventure.
Hello there. I see you've come to hear about some local adventurers. That's good. I think you can learn a lot about life through adventures, and I love telling stories, so here we are. So sit back and relax and just picture us on some distant shoreline, sitting around a cozy little campfire. We're going to show you some very different kinds of adventurers tonight, all people who live or have lived right here in Rock County. I hope by the end of the show that maybe you'll be inspired to plan some adventures of your own. Our first story might make you think about Huckleberry Finn and Jim and their little trip down the Mississippi River. Our modern adventurers were longtime friends, Bob Osborne and Bob Kimball. More than 40 years ago, these Janesville men decided to build a raft of their own and make a journey down the Mississippi River, starting at Prairie du Chien and all the way down to New Orleans. Each took a teenage son with them, Chris Osborne and Todd Kimball, and Todd's friend Al Castro joined for a couple of the voyages. They made trips over 8 times across 5 years and covered over 1,500 miles. Darn right. And just like Huck and Jim, they too got into some trouble, had to keep some secrets, and of course, learned more than a thing or two about this country. It all started when, tell you what, why don't we just listen in as Todd and Chris tell us how it began.
Mr. Osborne, Bob O, would talk about this trip that he did with his college roommates, and they went from Rock Island, Illinois to Prairie du Chien on spring break on a raft that they had built. And they said, when the boys are 15, 16, let's do the trip again, but go from Prairie du Chien to New Orleans.
There was probably some early planning by Bob O and Bob K, thinking we've got a big convincing job to do to convince the moms that this was going to be a good idea. I think it took a little bit of more convincing of my mom. I think she was reassured with BK's abilities and everything, but remained a little bit skeptical. But eventually she got on board and wanted to do her part to celebrate the project and wish the crew well. And she did it at the beginning with a bunch of flowers to take along with us.
And then we pre-built it down at the shop, and Chris and his dad would come down and help build that.
I remember being really impressed that Bob, Kay, and Todd knew what they were doing around materials and tools, and my dad and I did our best to contribute, but it was actually great. It was a great learning experience. My dad used to say that in their college trip, their navigation aids were a highway map and a flashlight with 2 almost dead batteries.
They wanted to keep it as close to Huckleberry Finn as possible. You know, at that point when we left, we didn't realize how important a radio is to communicate with tugs and the lock and dam masters and Coast Guard and things like that. But and I don't even think even after we got stranded, I don't think we took a radio with us.
One challenge we had that the Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer didn't was on the very first trip when we were kind of feeling our way and learning about some of the risks that we hadn't thought about. The water was high because it was in the spring. One time we ended up with a buoy that has tremendous buoyancy and upward pressure right under the raft. So we were kind of impaled, and there was of course a barge coming our way right at the moment. So a little uncalm moment. But fortunately we all ate a lot of dinner, and the 4 of us stood on one corner and jumped up and down until the buoy finally freed itself.
You know, on our first trip, we had some close calls with hitting one of the markers, and then the first lock we went through, we had an old engine that my dad borrowed, and we couldn't get it started. The floodgates were open on the dam, and Chris and I were both paddling to try to get out of the current, and in between the lock and the dam, there's a chunk of concrete that divides the lock and the dam, and we hit that thing sideways and slowly eased our way into the lock. If we would have gone the other way, we would have gone through the dam, and it would have shredded the raft, and that would have been the end of it. But we couldn't tell our moms or siblings about how dangerous the first trip was, or it would have been the end of the trip.
Indeed. Well, we'll be hearing more about that raft trip throughout the rest of the show. But next, let's look at a Janesville couple who has turned the everyday act of riding bicycles into something truly special.
Grandpa,
Oh, Scout!
I think these folks will know our next pair of adventurers through their Janesville coffee shop, Mocha Moment. Steve and Kathy Dean have taken many challenging cross-state bicycle treks and danced together for many years. It's all part of a lifelong love affair that, well, I just think it's inspiring, even if Grandpa finds it a bit too mushy. Just take a look at how they interact in this next video.
Well, I always liked pretty girls. Her brother, I knew him, and he kept saying that he had a sister he wanted me to meet, and I said, John, I don't have time for that. But finally, he talked me into it.
He called me on the phone for a date, so I didn't know what he looked like. And my roommate was dating his roommate, so I put the phone down and covered it, and I said, should I date him? And she goes, yeah, you should. He's neat. So that started it off, and I accepted it, and we just hit it off great, didn't we? But when we got married, I told Steve, I would love to ride bikes, and I said I would love to dance.
We've gone to the Butterfly almost 40 years now, every Saturday night. When I'm dipping Kathy pretty good, why people always say later, hasn't he ever dropped you? And you always say,
I always say, well, if he does, that's the last time we're going to do that. So he hasn't yet. Steve got our first bikes.
4th anniversary, we bought matching Schwinn bicycles.
And that started it. And we kept those bikes way too long because they're very heavy.
And then after we started getting ready to ride longer, why we got Fuji's, really nice bikes for us. And then Mike and Ann, Michael Cycles, bless their hearts, said, you guys really ought to have nice bicycles. And so they offered us a deal which we just couldn't pass up. A lot of people aren't even aware that the Amtrak is just a gift, because you can take your bikes on the Amtrak for $20. We usually take the Metro from Harvard, head out into Chicago, ride a half a mile to Union Station. And this is the last time we took the Amtrak then to Buffalo, got off and rode up into Canada. And we finished up 900 miles later in Penn Station and came back from Penn Station on the Amtrak. We're not health food nuts or exercise nuts, but we've always stayed in shape. And we've always been a one vehicle family. We have 5 children, and I ride my bicycle everywhere year round, except for if it's icy or dangerous.
So I got a trainer for my basement. So I keep up doing my bicycling during the winter downstairs, and I only do about 30 minutes 3 times a week.
Before we had kids, we'd lived almost to Beloit, and we would jump on our Schwinns and we'd ride over to Glarus, have an ice cream cone and ride home. It's like 95 miles round trip. We do that all the time on Saturdays. You ride through these villages, hamlets, you ride by orchards and vineyards and cornfields, and you see people in little pubs and taverns and people going about their daily lives. It's the most wonderful thing.
And then when we get done with our bike trip, that's when we really eat. And we just eat whatever we want then, since we've been riding bikes.
And so that's what we head for almost always, is microbrewery with a good brew and burger and fries.
The most surprising thing was when that road was washed out.
Oh, yes, yes.
That was pretty exciting.
Well, it was thunderstorms predicted. We had beat those. We had gotten into our Airbnb, and we'd walked across a smaller river that had levees on it, and we'd gone to a pub and had a brew and a small village downtown, maybe 1,000 people, and a burger and fries, and it was just raining cats and dogs after we got in there. And so all the locals in there know each other, and pretty soon this guy answers his phone and he says, I gotta go, the road's washed out. So he's volunteer fireman or whatever. Pretty soon another guy picks up his phone, he says, I gotta go too. He said, the roads are all getting washed out. Maybe an hour we were in there, when we finished, we picked our way across, walked on top of the levee, and the river was now clear up to the top of the levee. Made our way back, and we looked up the hill we had just come down, the whole road was washed out. They already...
It was amazing.
Yeah, it was a mountain town, but the road was literally gone. It's just gorgeous the whole way up. It's 200 feet over the Yakagani River going the other direction. And you can hear the rapids roar and watch the kayakers come down there by the hundreds. And then you look over to your right off the bluffs, and the waterfalls are coming off the mountain. It's just, the whole thing is spectacular.
We would do that one again. It was that beautiful, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If I can do it, anybody can do it.
I would just say you gotta do things that are gonna make you happy and productive. We've been together over 50 years, and we've been married almost 49. So I guess we're going for 50.
You know, I can't wait to spend my whole life with you. and have children with you, and maybe even someday open up a really cozy coffee shop.
Well, that sounds fun.
I mean, what are your hopes and dreams, Mrs. Dean?
Well, first, I want a bike. And second, I want to dance.
Well, I love biking, and I love to dance. I mean, I think I got some pretty good moves. Yeah. I thought you said you wanted to dance.
I do.
Great.
I did not say I was any good at it.
Great. I think we're gonna need to practice.
I brought home another VHS dance tape. Are you ready?
Yeah, great. Let's do it with the music this time, and let's try it with the music. And I think "try" is the operative word here. Okay.
Today we're learning some basic swing dance steps. Okay, partners, face each other, hold hands. Now we're going to do a side-to-side step. Men start with the left, women with the right. Ready? 5, 6, 7, 8. Side to side, side to side, side to side, side to side.
Almost.
Very good. Keep holding hands, and we're going to do a step back. It's called a rock step.
Nope, that's...
Women with the right, men with the left. Ready? Rock step back, side.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, couple number 3 in our finals dance competition, Steve and Kathy Dean.
That was a nice walk, Grandpa.
Not quite the hikes that we used to take, though.
Yeah, those were true adventures, but this was fun too.
Oh, yeah. Well, our next adventurer fought in some of our country's most famous battles of World War II. He was on the beach for D-Day in 1944, kissed by many French women during the liberation of Paris, and nearly died in the Battle of the Bulge. But that's not the adventure that we want to tell you about tonight. Nope, after the war, Frank Douglas returned home, and that tough son of a hardware store owner went to college on the GI Bill and became a remarkable, beloved geography teacher to generations of Janesville kids.
Never having children of his own, he shared his summers and his savings with students that he taught at Janesville High and later Craig High School. Most were cross-country car trips, but some were back to the continent where he had carried a rifle many years before. Frank Douglas passed on in 2020, but we found 2 former teaching colleagues and a former student to share his story. It begins when he hears about the attack on Pearl Harbor.
On Sunday, December 7th, 1941, which had been just a couple years before he graduated, and all of a sudden they were watching this movie, and the manager came out, shut down the movie, and alerted everybody that Pearl Harbor had been attacked, and everybody went home.
But on June 6th, he was in the Battle of Normandy.
You know, the storming of Normandy was huge. Just get your foot on hold there, secure that foothold and move on. And they liberated Paris the end of August of 44. And then on to the Battle of the Bulge. And then he got wounded severely. Fragments hit his face. And he went down. They thought he was dead. And Wendell Chapman, his foxhole buddy, wanted to take his personal stuff and make sure it got home. And so he went and checked on the body, and all of a sudden found that it was moving. And they, saved his life.
Well, he was interesting enough. Frank wasn't a church man, but he was a spiritual man. And he said, Providence, God, call it what you will, I was meant to make it through the war. And it changed my life. And it changed the way he looked at people, it changed the way he looked at the world.
Doug transformed his classroom to reflect the part of the geography that you were studying. And it was a real treat when you're transitioning into a new field of study, because he would take a cross-section of students who would give up their entire weekend to come in and transform this classroom. I'm talking, waterfalls and sand, and remove all the desks and even change your garb as you enter a room. So it was a different world. He really just had an eye for everyone. Everyone had talent in his mind, and whether it was hidden or not. So it was a really neat byproduct of being part of his sort of ecosystem. Hundreds and hundreds of kids went through, and you can meet them later in life, and they said, it was life-changing going through that experience of room 104 in world geography with Frank Douglas. He had that kind of impact.
I remember this also. He traveled over 400,000 miles, 4 trips around the world, and spent over $110,000 funding these trips, which in those days, that was a whole lot of money.
And I think I was on trip 24 and trip 25. And we hit all those sites going west. Mount Rushmore, the Black Hills, Devil's Tower. I remember where we took a little boat over St. Mary's Lake, and we're going to do a hike at the other end of it. And we started our hike, and it's just the 3 of us, and we get around a trail, and there's something right in the middle of the trail, something that was steaming still. And we heard rustling in the woods, and Doug's like, back to the boat. There's a grizzly. And so experiences like that. And then usually most of his trips would culminate in the Oregon coast. That was his love. There was Maxwell Point, there was Netart's Bay. I don't see, it's all coming back, right?
Yeah, look at you.
You know, the snickerdoodle, you know, that you get at a certain bakery, you know, nearby. And my second year with Bill Cunningham, from Oregon, we jumped over to Hawaii and got to explore Kauai, which was another joyful place for him. And he had other trips. Randy Kessinger got to travel around the world with him. They explored several different continents. Yeah, my trips were 5 to 6 weeks and probably 6,000 miles in a car. Our car was named Beulah. He named all his cars, I think, with the letter B or something.
Yeah, he had names for his cars.
Bing was the last one.
My first trip, Dan Clark didn't have his driver's license yet, and I had just gotten mine. I think that we were on US 2, just south of the Canadian border, and Doug fell asleep, and so Dan's like, geez, how fast can Beulah go? And so, and there's nothing. This is a road with nothing on it, and so we got it going as fast as it could go. And he woke up and he goes, Toby?
What the blankety blank are you doing?
Every day we journaled, and it was a way for you to get in that habit of being reflective. It was very educational. I think everyone's life who had traveled with him was impacted in some ways.
Rich Brown commented on Facebook after Frank had passed, and he said, Mr. Douglas, you are responsible. I am so thankful that you gave me the urge to travel, and you gave me a wanderlust. He said, every time I go to a new place, I think back of my teenage years, and that you gave me this inspiration to want to explore new areas.
I was never kissed by so many women in one day, in one place, at approximately the same time. Viva la Tariq! Hooray for the Americans. They have done things that people can't even imagine anybody doing. Constructive, informational, and fun. I have had a phenomenal life.
I've had some great teachers, but I wish I'd had one like Mr. Douglas. Times were different then, but I'm glad these days adventures include women too. But what a remarkable man. His life was a service to our country in many ways.
It was indeed. Well, let's go back to our river rafters. Those river adventurers. This next segment is going to tell us a lot about the two Bobs, the dads, and the different roles that they each had on that small little raft floating down the mighty Mississippi.
Well, I had worked with Todd's dad, since I was 12 years old doing stuff, but I didn't know Chris's dad all that well until this trip. He impressed me as, smart guy, and he was taking notes, and he would listen to the conversation every now and then. I remember him just, his head would come up and you could just see the light bulb shining, and he's jotting something down, and hey, if it was funny, he would laugh. I mean, yeah. And there were some funny things said and done. Both those guys were so great, and they were so different from one another that made the trip that much more special. I think the running joke, at least for me, was BK wearing those boots.
And I have to say that the yellow pants that Bobo had were equally irritating. So the deal was going to be that each would be burned at the end.
Mr. Osborne, he documented everything. We would have forgotten what these pictures were and where they were at. We always had 10,000 pictures of the river. He was writing pretty much, every hour he was jotting down bridges that we went under. Pretty much every bridge was designed differently. And my dad was a bridge engineer in the Army when he was in the service. So the documentation was a huge part that it just makes looking at the scrapbooks more interesting, knowing where this was and what time of year and who was on the trip. And
Bobo would flip through the maps, and I think maybe as much to reassure himself that we're going the right way on the river as anything else. That adventure was kind of a perfect match because, among his many, many skills, BK was just such an intuitive carpenter, engineer, constructor, and my dad would have been absolutely hopeless what to do with a hammer and a nail.
Yeah, when the two Bobs got together, you could really see Bob O light up when, going through pages, and he'd point at pictures and, not say a lot, but he remembered the pictures and where they were and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's really touching to flip through the old books with him now and see some spark of recognition. It's really nice.
What I learned from Bob O was documenting your trip. The next generations can look and see what their grandparents and uncles did when they were kids.
It was just really a great, lovely side benefit of this adventure to, get to know some really terrific people, and seeing Bob Kimball's innate kind of outgoingness and friendliness was a great example for me. I don't know if that turned me into an outgoing person, but at least I tried.
Did you catch that part about documenting your trip? If you don't jot some notes or keep a log or a journal, you could forget some of those stories, maybe even where you took those photographs.
Exactly. Our next adventure is one badass woman. Sorry. Jan Perrin lives on the Rock River where she can jump into a kayak anytime she pleases. She has kayaked or canoed nearly every major whitewater river in the Northeast and traversed major portions of the USA, Chile, Spain, and Portugal on bicycle, and been in long-distance competitions for kayaking and canoeing, winning accolades along the way. For her whole life, she has been competing on kayaks and canoes, on foot, and on bicycle. And she still keeps in top shape after all these years, so she and her husband can keep on keeping on. She says it's a way of life for them. She's also an avid hiking enthusiast. For her, her interest started as a child.
In elementary school, I told my mother I wanted a canoe. My brother said he wanted an airplane. We got neither. But as adults, he is a flight instructor, and here I am. My original interests always were in the arts. My grandfather actually got the first art scholarship to Harvard, but he had to refuse it because he had to support his family. But I was taken to museums from the time I was this big. As an adult, I focus on paddling, whether it's canoe or kayak. I focus on cycling and then backpacking. Sometimes if I'm going out of country, I'll be doing multi-sports. 2 years ago, I was in Chile, went from cycling in the Lakes and Volcano District, and then we went down to Patagonia for kayak camping in our in-sea kayaks. Equally exotic is sea kayaking on Prince William Sound in Alaska. Both of them had icebergs. This one woman decided that Jim and I needed to meet because we both paddled whitewater and we both kayaked. And from the get-go, it was decided I will never race with you because we wanted our marriage to last. We've encountered any number of grizzlies out west, and we do carry bear spray with us. I broke my first boat in two on a river. Basically, you have to pull off wherever you can and then walk out. We were backpacking in the White Mountains, over 100-mile-per-hour gusts, and we were doing the Bond Cliff Ridge, and it's steep drop off, a lot of exposure on both sides, and we would be taking a couple steps whenever the wind gusts would let up, and then we'd drop down into a telemark stance. We'd wait it out, we'd take a couple more steps, we'd drop down. I really didn't feel like being blown over the edge. Fun stuff is anything you survive, come back with a good story. There are always the angels on the water, on bikes. People always help out. We've never had a bad experience with people. You're all in the same world, and you're all there for the same reason. I've won a lot of first places, a couple big ones. Everybody in Janesville by now has heard of dragon boat racing. And that's 20 paddlers with a drummer and a steers person. And I was on the U.S. Mixed Masters team, mixed meaning men and women, masters meaning 40 plus. And the Worlds that year was held in Philadelphia. The U.S. team made it through all of the heats. My voice was absolutely hoarse from yelling and cheering, and then our biggest competition turned out Germany, and we eked them out. And it was the best. Really monumental time was there was a 70-mile canoe race, probably done it 17, 18 times, and the river was high. It was very high. A lot of people were spooked by the water because it flowed so fast, and there were also several whitewater stretches in it. We did 7 hours, 18 minutes. That record has stood for 21 years now. A big dream starts with small steps. Either find clubs, find people, learn the safety, and then just get basic levels of fitness. Both my husband and I will tell you we are very ordinary athletes with very good work ethics. I really love that, and at that time, the thought came to me that I may never see this riparian view again, and I need to appreciate it. I never realized that the riparian view was going to be my life.
I love that quote. Fun stuff is anything you survive and come back with a good story. I also like that she emphasizes the fact that adventuring can include some danger. But, as she just said, learn to do it safely. Speaking of survival, our river rafters have arrived in Mark Twain country, where all those stories of Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer were born.
I can't say for myself that I was quite as adventurous or self-reliant as either Huck or Tom or Jim, but fortunately we had some capable dads with us as well. But that was definitely a big highlight. Boy, when you sort of do something that you've read about in the books before, it's kind of cool to be at the place. When we floated into St. Louis, it was an especially high spring for the water, and so there was a crew in a helicopter filming just kind of the stuff that was floating down the river in front of the arch, because it's kind of scenic that way. And we were one of the pieces of debris that was floating down with all the flood stuff. And a few hours later, we were below St. Louis, and someone on a boat saw us and called out and had us come over and tie up to their boat, and they had a little TV on there. They let us on board, so we watched ourselves on TV. That was kind of nice.
You know, we set up the tents on the raft. I don't recall going to sleep as being scared. Probably helped that we had a few beers in us. So I remember when we were sleeping on the beach and I got that spider bite. I can't remember which eye it was, but it was swollen shut. And I woke up about, 4 in the morning and, sunburned, and I can't see out of one eye. And I poke Bob BK in the side and I go, hey, take a look at my eye. And I think he just said, holy shit, and went back to sleep. And that was, it was easy with those guys. I mean, just good guys to be with.
For me, the southern part of the U.S. was kind of exotic, and I'm sure didn't have any familiarity with it at all. And what a way to be introduced to that part of the country, floating down the Mississippi. Yeah, just being exposed to a different sort of slice of American society was just so eye-opening. Well, it sure made me appreciate the great variety and but always great friendliness and willingness to help out and just kind of a little fellowship of people along the river toward us was so wonderful.
Back home, everybody locks their cars and, sits in their backyards, and we were kind of going through these people's backyards on their Mississippi and on how people live on the river are completely different than people than city people. The people on the river have to rely on each other for when they have floods, and we'd meet people when we would come into a marina and need to get fuel or supplies. They would let us take their vehicle into town, but the people that on the river are so trusting and helpful that it's pretty mind-blowing that people would just give you their vehicle. And we would do that to my dad's car when as El Camino, we would go find a restaurant or a bar and find someone in the bar, a local person, and give my dad's El Camino for the whole entire week, and a couple $100, and just have them drop it off 200 miles or 150 miles downstream, and it was there every time. Keys were in it, and they'd had it gassed up, and they'd want to hear our story, and we'd hear their story on how they end up on the Mississippi River.
It's just a great reminder that everybody's got a story, and most of those stories you couldn't make up yourself, and it's just fascinating. We were an oddity, floating down the river, so people were curious about why in the world are you doing this.
This next adventurer never dreamed while growing up that she would climb the highest peaks on all 7 continents, let alone do it with a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. Her story starts with that diagnosis, which led her to restart her life with a whole new set of goals. But before we hear from Lori Schneider, I'd like to welcome the Life Dance Academy, dancing to a song inspired by Lori called Why Not?
Why not? Why not? If you can imagine it, I remember being in the kitchen with my dad one time. He said, someday I want to go to Africa and climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I said, well, someday I'll go with you. It wasn't until many years later that my dad and I actually did meet in Africa and climbed Kilimanjaro together. And we summited on my dad's 61st birthday. And I always kid him with that, it's your fault, Dad. I took off on this crazy tangent in life, and you started it all. I'll never forget the day. It was January 4th, 1999, and I was in bed getting ready to get up and get on my treadmill for the morning. And I swung my leg out of bed and I thought, gosh, my leg is numb and my arm is numb and this side of my face was numb. And it was as if someone had drawn a line down the middle of my body and one side was numb and one wasn't. So when I found out I had multiple sclerosis, I panicked. I didn't know what would happen to my body. One of the doctors said that I could be in a wheelchair soon. And in my mind, all I knew was that I wanted to do everything physical that I could while I still had good control of my body. It was that fear of losing my physical ability that got me to start climbing. Everest, because of the fact it's 29,032 feet and you can't breathe at that elevation, of course that's extremely difficult. With the lack of oxygen, sometimes you're only taking a step or two and then you've got to stop and breathe, breathe, breathe. If you were to go to Everest, if somebody dropped you off on the mountaintop without a chance for your body to produce more red blood cells, you would be dead in a couple minutes. You'd be unconscious and you would die. You have to go slowly and let your body get used to it. So on the big mountains, you would carry gear, you'd stash it, up high, and then you'd walk all the way back down 3, 4, 5 hours back down the way you just came. And then you'd sleep in your tent at a lower elevation as your body starts to produce more red blood cells. Then the next day you get up, you retrace your footsteps and you go right back 5, 6, 7, 8 hours to where you just were. And then you set up your tent and you sleep for the night. And the next day you do it again. And it's a series of doing that for days and weeks on end. And you had to carry a backpack with about 60 pounds of gear on your back while dragging a sled with another 60 pounds of gear behind you. When I climb, it's with mostly men at that level of climbing, and yet everyone was required to carry the same amount of weight. So for me, the strain on my body was very, very difficult. I had to train hard, and I trained about 4 hours a day, every single day for a year. And I did that by walking up hills with maybe 50 pounds in my backpack and dragging a sled behind me filled with truck tires or bricks. I remember coming off of the summit. It's dangerous going back down because you're tired. And I look just close to my right leg, and I asked the Sherpa who was with me, I said, "What is that?" And he said, "It's a body." And I said, "Whose body?" And he said, "Well, that's a famous climber, Scott Fisher. He was frozen in the ice. He'd been there for many years." It hit me that this is a life and death thing. I was on a team of 4. Well, the other 2 climbers quit after a couple of days, and the guide wanted me to quit also. And I said, I trained a year. These are very expensive. I only have one shot. And the weather turned just ferocious. And we were in the tent, snapped in a lining that makes the tent about 15 degrees warmer inside. So instead of 60 below zero inside the tent, it was only 45 below zero. But the winds were around 60 miles an hour, and we had face mask over face mask, goggles, spare goggles, 6 layers on top, 4 layers on the bottom, your down coats. He took out his camera, and we both got to do a little goodbye. And I remember thinking, I'm saying goodbye and I love you to people. It was setting your sights on something out there that's bigger than life in your mind and saying, why not? Not why me, but why not me?
Well, the Bobs, Todd, and Al endured some perilous and grueling days. In one trip in particular, when their raft got trapped in a backwater.
Journal entry, Saturday, May 19th. Drove to Hickman, Kentucky. Normal water level is 10 feet. Today, the level is at 54 feet. BK and Todd have fixed new engine mounts. Provisions are purchased. We let our friend Ken and his boat crew know we are heading out. Ken wished us well and suggested that a radio would be a real good thing to have aboard. How did he know? Wednesday, May 23rd. Overcast, gray. If this rainy weather doesn't quit soon, there will be 4 drowned river rats. 9 a.m., we take a wrong turn, hurtle through a 25-foot chute, hitting a dead tree, but the limb misses all on deck. Can't see an outlet in the lake beyond the chute. Motor's not strong enough to push back upstream. No luck. Wound up pushed against 2 trees. We have a good view of the river, about a football field away, but can't get to it. The kids rig up a pulley, so we keep rushing water off the deck. We hope a spotter plane will see our orange life jackets. Al ties us to a thorny tree so we don't overturn. It's just a matter of time before someone spots us and the Coast Guard comes to help. Nightfall. About 10 p.m., we start 2-hour shifts of shining our lanterns at the passing tows. We see 2 or 3 in the night, but none seem to see us nestled by the trees.
How can they sleep while we're stuck out here like this?
Yeah, but remember, they said we're only stuck, not lost.
Yeah, right. Nobody's even seen us yet.
Hey, you see that? Another barge! Hey!
Over here!
Hey!
Help!
Over here!
Over here!
Crap!
That guy Ken was right. We should have brought a radio.
Yeah, but the dads wanted to do it old school.
Yeah, Huckleberry Finn style.
Well, this is old school all right. Jeez, tough old farts. Remember when that spider bit me?
Yeah, your eye was all purple and swollen shut.
Your dad took one look at it and went back to bed.
Yep, and now we're here, stranded and without a radio. But at least we have beer.
Yeah!
Cheers!
Journal entry, Thursday morning, May 24th. As we are not overdue, we realize nobody will be looking for us until we fail to show up at the airport Thursday noon. It's all too obvious we should have brought along a 2-way radio. We bolstered our morale by cleaning ourselves up. All felt better. Then we cleaned up the raft. It was quite a mess, with laundry stuff hung all over. We hope a spotter plane can see us. We wave our orange life jackets at the passing tows, but in the daytime, we don't expect any acknowledgement. So near, and yet so far. 6:30 p.m. We cook up burgers and ration them out to 1 half hamburger each. I discover some warm gin. That'll do. Thursday night, we'll play Get the Toes Attention again.
Dang, I'm thirsty. I just want some water. Yeah.
Don't drink that. You'll be sorry.
What? It's only a little. Besides, it's not too brown. What the hell is that?
Cottonmouth! They're trying to get in our dry raft.
How venomous are they?
People die. You don't want to be bit. Of course, you drank that water, so...
Let's get them!
Just one more thing to worry about.
I'm not feeling too good. Guess I'll be awake for a while.
I told you not to drink it. Well, we need someone on Snake Watch anyway.
What's happening, boys? Why'd it have to be snakes?
Day 3, Friday, May 25th, 5 a.m. Al and I get the attention of an upriver tow. Light on us, steady for 10 seconds. They couldn't help but see us. However, at the second window to the river, we saw them continue on. Very frustrating. 2:30 on Friday. Still no rescue. BK and I were wondering why the Coast Guard hasn't found us, or the spotter planes. Our wives must be worried sick. There's no way to reach them.
I wish we could call home. Come on, don't worry. I'm sure they're looking for us right now.
Hey, y'all need some help over there?
Hey, over here! Help!
All right, we got you. And I suppose you're hungry.
Heck yeah!
When we got stuck, it was towards the end of our trip, and that's why we were low on supplies. We had some bread, so we'd take a piece of bread and we would slice it four ways, and we each get a quarter piece of bread.
Really, I didn't know what I was getting into, but when you're 18 or 19 years old, I mean, anything. You got no care in the world, really, so. Because I actually drank some of that river water and regretted doing so, but I was thirsty. It had been, I think we were out of old Milwaukee, and certainly anything we had was warm. We'd been stuck in the trees for a couple of days, so drinking that water was not a good move, but it felt good at the time. Instant gratification.
There's only two kinds of snakes, and you didn't have to identify them because they're both poisonous. They're cottonmouths and copperhead. The water was so high they wanted to get out of the water, and they'd either climb up a tree or want to get on the raft.
I remember sleeping in 2-hour shifts. That was horrible. It's, it's just part of the adventure. It was tough to be stuck in those trees and to see all the river traffic. And they would acknowledge us. We had a fire going, we had lights going, and they knew they could see something there, and they'd flash their lights at us, but they didn't know we were stranded. So that was a little frustrating.
And we saw the Coast Guard boat drove right by us, but they were going downriver past their destination. So they're looking downriver, they're looking in the wrong spot.
It was somewhat scary at times. That water was moving quickly. That felt really good, and it was really cool to get into that John boat, and they knew all these little nooks and crannies and all the logs they had to skip over, to get back to the shore. That was great. I'll never forget. They picked up, I don't know, probably a couple pounds of hamburgers, some ice, some buns, some chips, and that might be one of the best hamburgers I've ever had. After not eating for a few days.
And by the time the Coast Guard's rescue boat got there, the boys had got the raft out of the trees, out of the backwater, and the Coast Guard gave us a little gas and they just let us go on our way. I would have thought they would have red flagged that thing and said, you guys aren't taking that thing any farther, drag it up on the bank and take it apart. But they let us go, and then the moms after that trip, then they're like, you guys aren't doing more trips. But they let us do it again, the last trip.
An adventure can go bad easily, but the best part is being able to survive so you can laugh about it later. Right, Grandpa?
Right you are, Scout. Well, you know, some adventurers do face death many, many times. Roy Chapman Andrews, who grew up in Beloit, went on to become a worldwide celebrity and a hunter of dinosaur bones. He once graced the cover of Time magazine. Some speculate he was even the inspiration for the iconic Indiana Jones. Both facing similar dangers of wildlife and locals and, of course, all those brushes with death. Andrews also wore the wide-brim hat and carried a revolver at his hip as he explored the dangerous Gobi Desert in Mongolia in the 1920s and 30s. The Roy Chapman Andrews Society works to keep his spirit alive and every year awards a modern explorer.
Last year's award went to modern dinosaur hunter, paleontologist Philip Curry of the University of Alberta, Canada. Curry himself has explored the Gobi Desert and counts Andrews as an inspiration for his life.
When I was 11 years old, I stepped on a nail, which went right through my foot. And so then I was confined to class essentially during recess and lunch periods. And at the back of the room was a bookshelf, and there I found a book about dinosaurs. It was called All About Dinosaurs by Roy Chapman Andrews. And so the day I read the book, I decided I was going to do that. I think knowing what you want to do makes a big difference, and having a goal also makes a big difference. You know, Roy Chapman Andrews worked in Mongolia and China back in the 1920s and 30s. And then one day I woke up in the middle of the Gobi Desert with the Gobi sun beating down on my head and realizing, wow, I've really made it. I followed in the footsteps of Roy Chapman Andrews, and here I am at one of the sites where they actually worked. Working in the Gobi Desert really is very different in a lot of ways from working in North America. To get to our site, it's only about, say, 500 miles from the capital city, but it can take you sometimes 2 weeks to go that far because of the lack of roads, because of all the roughness you're going through, problems with flat tires every couple of miles, you name it, it becomes a very difficult thing. If there's no roads, there's no gas stations. So what do? Well, they put together a camel train every year, which carried gasoline into the desert. Organizing things at that time was a massive endeavor. Local people sometimes just have their own way of dealing with things, and this is true in North America as well. And in some ways, it really is like riding into the Old West, where you have somebody riding up on a horse to you and threatening to shoot you. If somebody thinks that you're infringing on their properties and that what you're doing is taking away their livelihood, it's not a good thing, and especially if they think that what they're doing is right. So definitely the Central Asiatic expeditions did run into bandits on several occasions where they exchanged gunfire with them. Of course, they worked into the fall, and in the fall things get very cold at night in particular. And vipers and other types of snakes very often will get together into hibernaculae, and they'll spend their winter together, so you'll have hundreds and hundreds of snakes in one place. And at one point, the Central Asiatic expeditions had set up on a hillside overnight.
I thought they were gonna bump us off.
Bandits everywhere. You all right, Walter?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Man, you were great. We really scared them off there.
Gotta level with me, Roy. You sure you're all right?
Yeah, I'm fit as a fiddle.
Ooh, that scared the bejeebus out of me.
You know, this isn't not my first encounter with death. Or bandits, for that matter. I mean, I'm pretty sure I got a lucky star somewhere. You know, I've cheated the Grim Reaper about 10 times.
Only 10?
Yeah, 10 times. 2 times, I nearly drowned in a typhoon. One time, my boat was charged by a wounded whale. Once, my wife and I were nearly eaten by wild dogs. One time, I was almost killed by fanatical locals. Twice, I tripped, almost fell over a cliff. One time, a python came up out of nowhere, grabbed my leg. That was a close one. And 2 times, these bandits. 10 times I have escaped death.
Wow, you're the bee's knees, Roy.
Yeah,
Woo, I'm still shaking. I'm ready to drink an entire bottle of whiskey and get zazzled.
Yeah, I hear you there. That sounds real good. But, you know, it's going to be a long day tomorrow. I think we ought to just get some shut-eye.
Yeah, you're right. Well, at least we got this nice, nifty, warm spot for our tents.
Yeah.
Our nights have been cold as hell.
They sure have. I mean, it's nothing too swanky, but it'll do.
Yep. Ugh. Well, good night, Roy.
Yeah. Good night, Walter, and sleep easy. Yeah. Hey, Walter. Is that you touching me?
I'm not touching you.
All right.
What is this, some kind of joke? Stop tickling me.
What are you talking about, Walter? I said I'm not touching you. I'm gonna need you to move real slow, like, and whatever you do, don't panic. It's vipers. Jay, I said don't panic. Pit vipers, get him! Get him!
Well, here's another chance at seeing death, Roy.
Yeah, but why'd it have to be snakes?
Yeah, this is an interesting year this year. In 22, they found the Flaming Cliffs, and actually in 1922, they found the first dinosaur egg. Well, interesting. The association of eggs and dinosaurs had not been made before. The fact that so many eggs had been found at the Flaming Cliffs turned the light switch basically on. And people realized that these were dinosaur eggs without question. The interesting thing about dinosaur eggs is that, particularly these ones from the oviraptor, they're eggs that in some ways are very much like bird eggs. The way the dinosaur was laying the eggs, it was standing in one spot. It was laying a pair of eggs, turning its body, laying another pair of eggs, turning its body, laying another pair of eggs. And at the same time it was laying the eggs, it was taking its hands and scooping sand onto the eggs. And then she laid down on that nest of eggs, and with her chest covering some of them, and she protected those eggs until the eggs hatched. With paleontology, there's always a certain amount of serendipity. Roy Chapman Andrews referred to his life as being lucky. Of course, luck is really what you make of it. It's knowing what you want to see in life and being able to recognize it at the right time when things open up for you, and Andrews was very good at that. Yeah, Roy's first wife, Yvette, I think, was one of the reasons that he took off as well as he did at the beginning. She was a person who was very competent in photography. She was the woman behind the man. I think they had a very good relationship. There's no doubt that Andrews really was one of those special people that went far above what you would expect a scientist to do. Through books, through interviews, through talks, whatever, he made science come alive for people, and he inspired people like me to go on and get involved. But we also believe in taking this forward as well to a new generation of kids.
For Grandpa, he made a wonderful life for himself, full of the spirit of adventure. I am so grateful for the memories we have shared in our adventures together, and I cherish the stories he has shared with me since I was a little girl. They gave me a spirit for adventure, and they inspired me to go on and make my own stories. For Grandpa,
I'm not sleeping, I'm only resting my eyes.
For Grandpa, like Roy Chapman Andrews, it all began in a little Midwestern town.
From a Midwest town, it was there I truly found the will to try. Dreamed I could fly. The people around me believed anything I could achieve. My highest goal from within my soul. Determined, ambitious, so real, not fictitious. I learned to work hard to play my best card. Though I'm from a Midwest town, it was there I truly found the will to try. Dreamed I could fly, reached for the sky to follow my dream.
Meanwhile, back on the Mississippi, Bob Kimball was known to many as BK and sometimes Captain, but on this trip, him and Bob Osborne were co-captains. Their families still tell their stories with fondness to this day. Here's how their journey ended.
The last trip, the only problem was the raft was sinking. We had lost one barrel and we had to stand in the front just to keep it out, so the engines wouldn't go underwater. But it was about done floating.
It was awesome. I'd never been to New Orleans before, and it was hot. I just remember how just brutally hot it was and humid. And I remember seeing everybody waving at us, and just what a great feeling that was to know that we had made it, and people were happy to see us and we were happy to see them.
At the end, when we were floating into New Orleans, the group of friends and family got themselves onto a paddle wheeler that was tied up along the side of the river, that the raft came alongside, and there were flowers there that were rained down on the raft from above. Yeah, just kind of unbelievable, a real sort of feeling of accomplishment when you think back on the many, many miles from Prairie du Chien to make it all the way. And that was the goal all through all those years, to actually make it. Was a really moving thing, and just a great feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment.
All the people we met along the way, my dad invited everybody down. They rented this little hotel called the Grenoble House, and then when we did get down there to see the mayor of New Orleans came to our black tie party and gave us a key to the city. Pretty much all our friends and family were there.
It was really, really a great party.
I guess I would say charter a houseboat with a captain. We had some real close calls that somebody's looking out for us. So we lucked out about 3 times. Things could have gone south real quick. It just was not designed for the power of the Mississippi.
It was good fortune to have a couple of visionary and capable dads. And just like Todd's saying, the close calls make for great stories. And we were sure very lucky, as so many people are that start out on an adventure. And, a little bit of brave naivete helps to keep the momentum going and make, sort of stupid ideas sometimes turn into great adventures.
I'm so grateful to be a part of it, because I'm not one of Bob's and Sons. I'm Al. So it was nice to be included.
Not everybody has a chance to do something sort of significant and meaningful and long-lasting like that with their dad.
I think that the trip that we did with our fathers, I wouldn't trade it for the world. And, you'll never forget those memories.
We're almost done. And I have to tell you, we hardly went beyond the surface for some of these tales of adventure. But we did our best to cram a lot into the very short amount of time we had together. There are books about Laurie Schneider, Roy Chapman Andrews, Frank Douglas, who wrote several autobiographical works, and they're all located and available at the Hedberg Public Library.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed yourselves this evening and maybe even felt a little inspiration to go plan an adventure of your own. Pass along your own stories to your kids and grandkids. That way, they'll always carry a little piece of you with them. Good night.
Did I ever think I could climb Everest? Heck no. But I thought, I'm going to give myself permission to try. To me, adventure means putting yourself on the line and doing something that scares you a little bit and pushes you just a little bit beyond what you thought you could do.